Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the College and Career Corner. We are so excited to have you all here tonight with us, and we are excited to have with us Mr. Calvin Wise from Johns Hopkins University. He is here to talk to us about essay writing, and we are so excited because we know a number of you are writing your college essays as we speak. But before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our presenter this evening. He is the Deputy Dean of Admissions and is currently in his 13th year at Johns Hopkins University and his 15th year in the field. In his role, he provides strategic direction for all aspects of undergraduate recruitment and serves as the public face of the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. And if that wasn't enough, in addition to his office duties, Mr. Wise collaborates with several campus wide committees dedicated to promoting success. And that's what we're all about here at the College and Career Corner. So without further ado, Mr. Wise, the floor is all yours for tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Whitaker, and I appreciate you all including me in this session. I'm just going to take a moment to pull up my presentation and all right. There we go. All right, so pin this. All right, are you able to see the PowerPoint? Is it showing appropriately?
Yes, we see it.
All right, cool. Again, thank you everyone for inviting me into this presentation, and for you all taking some time out of your evening to tune in to learn about how you can best tell your story in the college admissions process. As I was just introduced, my name is Calvin. I work at Johns Hopkins University, and this is a welcomed break for me to talk to you all, prospective students who are navigating the process. My office right now, we are knee deep in reviewing applications. We are working through our QuestBridge applications as well as Early Decision 1. So this is a nice break from reading applications to talk with you all, as well as I do feel like I've read a good number of essays already for this year. And so I definitely want to emphasize some things that I'm already starting to see, and just some of the ways that you all can think about how to best tell your story. As I was putting this presentation together, I thought that it would be incomplete if I did not talk about the activities list, because I do think that the activities list paired with the essay is how students are able to best tell their story and who they are in the admissions process. So I snuck in an extra bonus for you all in this presentation. Hopefully you find it helpful. Feel free to leverage the Q&A feature as I'm going through the presentation, and we will answer those along the way, or I'll definitely save some time at the end to be able to do so. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and hop in. All right, so we're going to first talk about holistic admissions review. That's really important. Not all schools require essays or practice holistic admissions review. So I think it's good to contextualize what essays mean and what holistic admissions means. To start, we're going to talk about the activities list, what role essays play in the process. I have a little bit of a comparison activity that will hopefully showcase the things that I'm talking about. And then I have some tips to get started before we dive into the questions. All right, so just to kind of put some context out there, for one, I represent a school that practices holistic admissions review. So there are basically two different ways that colleges evaluate a student's application. There is one way that's very quantitative. Colleges will basically look at a GPA and a test score and make a decision based off of those two data points. There are lots of schools out there like that. There's some great schools out there like that. You can go on their website and they'll tell you if you have this GPA, maybe weighted or unweighted, and this test score, you're either admitted or not, right? That's a very straightforward process. There typically aren't too many questions. Maybe, are you looking at weighted or unweighted, or, maybe some of the schools are test optional navigating that. But for the most part, that's pretty straightforward, right? We don't have a ton of questions about the quantitative admissions processes. The ones that feel kind of shrouded in secrecy or harder to kind of understand how colleges are making decisions practice what we call holistic admissions review. That tends to be more selective institutions, which means they say no more than they say yes. I will state that most colleges across the country are actually not selective, right? The average admissions rate for all schools across the United States is about 66%. So, despite what you might see in the media or what the buzz is around schools, there are a lot of great schools out there that would love to have you in their incoming class. The beauty of the higher education system in the United States is that there is a degree, there's a pathway to a bachelor's degree for pretty much anyone, right? And as a matter of fact, when you're like community college or open enrollment, there are a lot of great schools that are admitting over 80% of the students that apply. There are probably only, I don't know, 500 schools out of the 4,000 that admit less than 50%. And there are probably only about 100 that are below 20%, which we call the highly selective institutions. Of course, I'm at a school, Johns Hopkins, that we are super, super selective. Our admit rate last year was about 6%. There are probably only a small handful, a couple dozen colleges that have less than a 10% admit rate. So I just want to put that out there. Schools range in selectivity. Those that are more selective tend to be holistic, and they're basically holistic because they have more competitive students if they took a quantitative approach than they have seats in their incoming class, right? So they have to employ some other tactics to understand if a student how a student will best fit into their incoming class. We call that holistic admissions. Just as a note, you may be thinking about schools that aren't that selective or who have a quantitative admissions process, but a lot of things I'm going to talk about may be relevant to if you're applying to scholarship programs or scholarships to institutions. So just be kind of aware of that. Generally speaking, colleges look at, they break your application components into three distinct sections. There you're going to look at your academic character, your impact and initiative, and your university match, your match for that institution. So let me kind of address some misconceptions around that, right? So I think the first one for schools that are more selective is that my job is to reward past success. And that's not necessarily true. My job is to predict future potential, and more specifically, what your future potential means on my campus. So let me give you some examples of what that means. And I'll start with the academics, right? So we get all these application components. It's pretty clear the components that connect to your academics, your transcript, testing, even your counsel letters, school profile, and teacher letters. We are assessing your academic character, right? So it's an and. We want students who are good students and they showcase a love of learning and they possess intellectual curiosity, right? Some colleges I've heard out there call it intellectual vitality, right? They are going to dig deeper than just the number. They will use that school profile. So most schools, the vast majority, if not all the schools that we get applications from, we ask for some school information, either through the secondary school report or a school profile that provides us some information about your school. So we know there are probably students here that have AP. In Florida, you have ACE, you have IB, dual enrollment. We look at students schools that practice holistic admissions, look at you within the context of the school that you're coming from. We are not going to penalize you for opportunities that were not available to you, right? So we look at your school, your academics, your transcript within context of your high school. So we break it down. We look at grade trends. Are you on an upward trend? How do your grades respond to take more and challenging coursework? Are you taking rigorous courses? You say you want to be an engineer. Hopefully you're doing well in math and science and physics classes. I know I don't want to stand on a bridge that an engineer built that failed physics, right? So those are the things that we're digging into around the academics. But we're also learning about, you from your teachers. How are you in the classroom? How do you respond to interesting material? How are you in smaller classroom settings? And so all of that is the academics. Students come to me and they say, are you looking at my weighted or my unweighted? I'm looking at both and kind of neither. I'm breaking down your grades and your grade trends and the rigor and what courses you're taking. What are your teachers saying, right? So it's much broader than just the numbers. Holistic admissions is less about the numbers and more about what those numbers represent, right? And that's not to say that students who are admitted to selective schools, you can, not do well in high school. It's that schools that have holistic admissions, they have lots of students who are doing really well in high school relative to their environment. We're trying to really break down and understand your academic character and that future potential I mentioned earlier. How does that transfer to our campus experience? Some of the academics we might fall into what we talk about today, your essays and your story. But oftentimes the activities list, the personal statement, the supplemental essay, that is the impact, the initiative, the match, right? We are thinking about what perspectives you're bringing to our campus, right? At Hopkins, we are the nation's leading research institution. We have a bold mission to solve the world's most difficult problems, right? If we're going to solve the world's most difficult problems, we cannot have a homogenous group of people on our campus. We need people from different backgrounds and perspectives and experiences and skill sets, right? You can't have a symphony when everybody is, playing, it's just all violins, right? That's not going to work to create that robust sound. Having students who are all the same on our campus is not going to be a robust campus experience. So that's where we're really digging into your story. Again, I talked about academic character. We break down your application to pull out evidence of impact and initiative, evidence of the match for the institution, and I'll talk about what that looks like in our process. The last thing, by talking about essays and activities list, the last thing I'll say about holistic admissions is that it is individualized, it is context-driven, and it's evidence-based. So my staff spends a lot of time. We got over 45,000 applications last year. We spend the better part of November through March reading each individual application, every essay, every word of every letter of recommendation. So best believe we are understanding who you are, at least how it's presented to us. We are looking at the context of where you are coming from, your neighborhood, your home, your school. It is evidence-based. We are pulling information out of the application to identify evidence of the things that we're looking for in our process. So I wanted to start with a framework so you all understand how we evaluate students in the process, because I think that will help you understand what role your story, activities, and essays play in this process. So we'll start with the activities list. So I personally think, and I've been reading some applications this year, so it's super top of mind for me, the activities list is the most underutilized and underappreciated piece of the application, right? I'm going to tell you why and give you some examples in a second. But when you apply to an institution, seniors, you probably know this, if you're applying to schools, the Common Application or the Coalition Powered by SCORE, those are cohort applications. So the Common Application, you can apply to Hopkins and lots of other schools across the country using one application. Most of the information goes to all schools, and then we have our own supplements, and I'll talk about supplements in a second. So in the Common Application, there is an activities list. It is basically your resume, right? And we use that to understand basically how are you spending your time outside of class? What are you doing outside of eating, sleeping, and going to class, right? What are your interests? Where are you making an impact and taking initiative? And can we picture you as a thriving member of our living and learning community? Hopkins, we are a residential college. So I'm not thinking about you just as a student. I'm thinking about you as a roommate, as a clubmate, as a teammate, as somebody who bumps into somebody else on the pathway mate, right? Like these are learning communities that we're building that extend outside of the classroom, right? Because you're going to live, learn, on my campus. So these are the questions we're asking ourselves, right? And you will see, I'm not looking at your activity saying, is this student a leader, right? How many service hours does a student have? No, I'm thinking about what those involvements mean as I think about your potential impact on my campus. All right, the essays. So there are usually two different types of essays. Most schools that require essays will ask for the personal statement. And the personal statement is what people will say is, if you're using the Common Application, the Common App essay. It is one essay that goes to all schools. Quick tip, do not put any school name in the personal statement. I saw that last week, right? Keep in mind that maybe you have a top school in mind, but that essay, that's the personal statement, goes to all colleges. There, you can look at the Common Application prompts. They usually don't change much from year to year if we have some younger students on the call. It complements but doesn't repeat other aspects of the application. So again, and we'll see this, your personal statement should not regurgitate your resume, your activities list. And it provides a window into how you might contribute to our campus community, right? It's a window, very small, under 600 words or 650 words. It is not a barn door, a garage door, even a front door, right? It is a small window. It's important to keep that in mind. I think the most common mistake I see with essays is that students try to put too much into it. You're not going to be able to tell us your whole life story in an essay. I'm a big movie guy, love TV shows. I love movie trailers and teasers. They're great, right? They're exciting. They bring you into a moment. They leave you with some intrigue, but they don't tell the whole story. You wouldn't tune into the show or the movie, right? Your essay, personal statement should be kind of a movie trailer to who you are as an individual. The supplemental essay, those are going to be unique to each individual school. Now, not all schools that require essays will even have a supplemental essay, but some schools will. Like Hopkins, we have one that basically asks you to talk about your life story and your experiences and how it has kind of shaped your perspectives and what you hope to get out of your Hopkins experience, right? So it's a little bit about you. It's a lot about us. And that's how we think about that direct match, right? Especially for more selective schools. Again, they have more competitive students and they have spaces in their incoming class. They are thinking about who are you as a puzzle piece and how do you fit into this large puzzle that they're building? So this is the supplemental essays is your one opportunity to make a very explicit case as to why you're a good match for that institution, right? You want to answer it clearly, directly. You want to be authentic. There isn't really a correct answer. We're just really trying to understand who you are. All right, so we're going to do a quick little activity. Cool, I'm good on time. And we're going to compare. We're going to compare some activities list, some personal statements, and I'm going to talk you through what I see in some of the mistakes that students make as they're putting together their activities lists and their personal statements, right? So also for the purposes of this exercise, imagine that one applicant, it's the same applicant for both activities list and personal statements, right? So you will see there will be 2 different activities lists, 2 different personal statements, but how students approach that can differ, and there are different strategies in how you're pulling the information together and how that tells the story of who you are, right? So St. Calvin, the applicant, is putting together their activities list and their personal statement. And again, we have a lot more information about an applicant than I'm going to show today, but you'll see just through these 2 pieces of documentation that you start to get an idea of who a student is. All right, so this is how the activities list looks basically when I see it in on my dashboard, right? We read online, the staff opens up the application. In my office, we have 2 people who read the application at the same time and then have a discussion. So I'm gonna pull back the curtain a little bit for you guys. So I pull it up, I look at the activities list. Just a quick tip, the common application will tell you to list your activities in order of importance to you. So I'll look at this and say, okay, Science Olympiad is the most important activity for the student. On the left-hand side, you will see the years the student is involved. Is it a school activity during the school year? Is it only during the school year? Is it the full year all the way around? Or does it happen during breaks? How many hours a week and then how many weeks a year? That gives me a sense of how much time you've been involved in things. As a note, you may think that we are looking for students who've been involved for things for multiple different years. I get this question a lot. Again, my assessment is impact and initiative. And for some students, they have made a significant impact with an activity one time throughout high school. Some students have done through all 4 years. And I'm not partial. I'm just trying to learn how you spent your time, right? And this is where I think students kind of just dial it in. And I think this is the most underutilized space, that you are able to put a very short description of the activity under it, right? And you'll see sometimes students do a better job than others. And I think they just don't think about this as an important piece, and it's a very short description. The Science Olympiad, what am I gathering from your involvement in that, Calvin's involvement in that? You compete in study and lab events. You placed in the top 20. That's great. And you've mentored new students to join that club. Aha, right? So the student could have just said Science Olympiad involved, have placed in top 20, right? Again, I'm thinking through this. I'm looking at this through the lenses of academic character and impact and initiative. Academic character, okay, cool. If this student is interested in science, it looks like they're exploring their science outside the classroom. But this also provides some insight to the student's impact. They have mentored new students that join the club, right? So again, that was a nice 2-for-1 that they were able to lay out in the activities in the first activity. The second one, science tutored local middle school students in the after school program. Was a class rep, elected sophomore years as secretary, helped lead a movement to make school dress code more inclusive. Awesome. Impact, care for sibling, family responsibilities. Took some additional courses through Coursera, which is kind of free open courses in the sciences, and volunteered at a science museum. Okay. So what do I kind of synthesize after I look at this? It's very clear the student is interested in the sciences. Loud and clear. Most of the activities are the sciences. Another quick tip. I get a lot of questions about, is it better to be well-rounded or is it better to have like a one singular focus? When I was growing up, everybody was like, you need to be well-rounded. You need to play a sport, play an instrument, and do community services to get into college, right? And now it seems like it's shifted. I get a lot of questions. I need to find one distinct passion, right? Both of those aren't necessarily true. We have space in our incoming class for students who are well-rounded, who have specific interests. Your role is to tell your story through the application, right? So love of science. There's also some impact, right? So this student, it seems like there's an interest in supporting younger students. They are mentoring new students that join the club. They're tutoring in science. They have family responsibilities. That's pretty cool, right? It seems like there's some type of care for others, which, as you can imagine, we're thinking about students joining a college campus. I would love for students who care about others around them, right? As well as they help the movement to make the dress code more inclusive. That's pretty cool as well. All right, so I learned all that at the quick synthesis of the activities list. All right, let's look at activities list number 2. Same student, but you'll notice some things are different. So one, the descriptions are different. Science Olympiad is still number 1. If I flip back, the order of activities is different. So that's a little bit of a head scratcher, right? I'm not sure. Again, I'm looking at order of importance. So as I go down, I understand what means the most to students. You want to make sure that that's your order of activities. It represents that. But the descriptions, met bi-weekly and competed in events, right? That's not that helpful, right? Sometimes students will say, varsity basketball. I was a member of the basketball team. I know you said that you put varsity basketball on the activities list. I know you were a member. Use that space to really explain your involvement in that activity, right? In a way that anchors around the academic character and the impact and initiative that we're looking for. Some things are missing, right? Family responsibility. So this is something, I think about when I was going through the college process. I'm a first generation college student. There wasn't a ton of college knowledge around when I was applying to college. Again, as I mentioned, I thought you had to be well-rounded. So on my activities list, I put that I, played basketball, I volunteered in a nursing home, and I played in a jazz band. That didn't fully encapsulate how I spent my time, as I mentioned earlier, outside of eating, sleeping, and going to school, right? I also had a lot of family responsibilities. I have a younger brother who's 4.5 years younger than me. I was helping with homework. I was helping cook dinner. I was doing laundry, a lot of household chores when my parents worked, right? That was a pretty significant impact. And if I think back to where I was making an impact, I think I definitely had more of an impact in my household than I did even through my volunteer work. I think that the people I met at the nursing home, they probably enjoyed my conversation, but you ask my parents, they would probably say that cooking dinner for my younger sibling was significant, right? I also worked at a movie theater. I loved that job. That was probably one of my favorite jobs throughout my life, outside of probably this one, right? I didn't think that colleges cared about work. My friends worked, I worked, and so I needed it for money. I didn't see it as an extra, quote unquote, extracurricular. But I thought I did a great job working there. I worked at the movie theater. I loved working at the concession stand during the busy time, talking to people, making sure the popcorn didn't burn, right? selected as employee of the month one month, right? So I had an impact, in my work. I did not include that on my activities list. And so my point there for you all is to, one, be thoughtful about the descriptions and make sure that you are fully encapsulating the things that are important to you, and where you are making an impact in your school community, in your home community, in your church, faith-based organization, around where you live. We are impartial, right? You can have just as significant as an impact, in your job as being, president of the student council, right? And to be honest, we care less about titles and more about that impact. We all know people who are part of organizations or workplaces that may have the title but are not making the most significant impact, right? So keep that in mind. So again, make sure you're taking advantage of those very short descriptions. That's going to help me understand who you are as a person. Okay, so let's recap before we get to the essays, because the essays are an extension of who the student is. So as I mentioned earlier, we get a sense that they love science. They're pursuing it outside the classroom. They're volunteer workers around science. They're competing in science, but they also have this love and support for other people that are navigating into new spaces, as well as supporting individuals at home. So here's the first essay. I'm going to give you a second to read it. It might be hard for you all to read. I'll give it a quick read for you all. Never have I been more intrigued about chemistry than the last time I had to buy shampoo. Please don't tell my chemistry teacher that my time in the aisles of CVS was more educational than our countless chemistry labs. But to be honest, it was. Chemistry has always been something that just makes sense to me. I love the periodic table in middle school and treated like a puzzle to be solved. So when I got to take honors chemistry sophomore year and now AP chemistry this year, I was so excited. Never have I started reading my textbook when it was still technically summer. But my chemistry textbooks were seriously thrilling. Sure, stranger things may have been how my peers were spending their fall sophomore year, but I was 5 chapters ahead in the chemistry textbook, and I couldn't wait to find out the ending. By now, I'm sure you will believe me, I'm a proud chemistry nerd. And I stand by original statement that buying new shampoo has been the most impactful learning experience for chemistry yet. To be honest, there's a reason I needed to switch shampoos. I had developed dandruff. I know, gross, but don't despair. I found a great shampoo and will be showing up to your campus with a flake-free head. I showed up to CVS and picked up the classic Head and Shoulders shampoo and started to head out. While walking to the cashier, I absentmindedly looked at the back. Naively, I didn't expect to see the words that, because of my chemistry textbook, were now familiar. And then there's some chemistry words. So again, and I should also note, these 2 personal statements we're going to discuss are actual excerpts of 2 essays. What I'll say about this essay, and both of them are helpful. I don't call essays good and bad essays. I say what's helpful and what's not so helpful. A couple of things about this essay. What's helpful? So what the student has done and made abundantly clear is that they love science, right? If we think about the activities list, we go into this personal statement, they have really doubled down that science is really important to them. They mentioned that they were, so excited to start AP chemistry. They were reading ahead in the textbook in the summertime. Chemistry is even spilling outside into their personal life as they're buying shampoo, right? So the academic character comes through really strong in this essay, as well as the combination of the activities list. So the students applying to me at Hopkins, I'm looking at this and saying, here's some good evidence of academic character. I think this essay also shows a little bit of personality. So your personal statement to college is a little different than your essays and usually your English class that has the format of intro, body, and conclusion. It can be more personal. It can be more creative. If you're funny, you can be funny. If you're not funny, please don't try to be funny. It's very hard to be funny in an essay in a written format. But it should show your personality. It should be well written, but we understand that you are 16 and 17 years of age, right? It doesn't. Some of my favorite essays are about everyday experiences, right? This is a helpful essay that's about chemistry and and shampoo shopping, right? A lot of students think that they have to have had some type of traumatic experience or, something that is super dramatic to wow an admissions office, right? I have read hundreds of thousands of essays in my admissions career. You are not going to impress me with the topic of your essay. But what is impressive is what essays share about a student, right? It is the topic is not that important. A lot of students start with the topic. I think starting with what you want to share about who you are to the admissions committee is most important. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I share tips later on. So again, just to recap, strong love of chemistry, academic character. All right, second essay. Again, same student, same chemistry lover that we've been talking about, but instead of essay personal statement A, they submitted personal statement B. All right. I'll read it. We left the principal's office a little beaten down, expecting her to agree it was a great idea to implement it right away. She did think it was a great idea, but said we need to do a little bit more work before they could change the school's dress code. I looked around at the disappointed faces and said not to worry. Let's make a plan. We went to a coffee shop after school, and we went over the questions our principal asked us. I suggested we should conduct surveys of the student body during lunches. Glenn said we can go to a PTA meeting and do the same with parents, and Sarah said she'll call the uniform storm and ask them about the shorts. We set out to do our tasks over the next couple of weeks. I got a group together to take shifts to conduct surveys. During lunch that week, Sarah called the uniform store to ask if they had girls' shorts, if they offered them in the right color, and how much they'd cost. With this information, Sarah, Glenn, and I presented to the PTA and asked the parents to fill out a survey. We used all this information to write a new letter with charts and graphs from the survey we conducted. Our principal was quite impressed and said we could present at the next PTA meeting but for a vote this time. And the vote was unanimous. Girls are now allowed to wear shorts as part of the uniform. We are all very proud of this. By working together and putting in the work, we were able to make our uniform policies more inclusive. So what's helpful about this? So this is an example of, as you remember, there was mention about, as part of the student government, that they helped to make the uniform code more inclusive. So sometimes students ask, should I write my essay about something on my resume? This is a good example of not about expanding on something on your resume, but not really regurgitating what it was, right? It talks more and explains more about making the uniform policy more inclusive, but it tells a lot about the student, right? What does it tell us about the student as they kind of navigated this uniform policy change? We talk a lot in admissions and in education about non-cognitive skill sets, right? Love of learning, I mentioned earlier, but reaction to setbacks, navigating systems, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, goal setting, right? These are the skills that we know are important for students to be successful in college, and we look for them in the application process. And so this essay talks about reaction to setbacks when the principal said that they couldn't, that they weren't going to change the uniform policy, working collaboratively with others, creating a plan, doing research and surveys, right? So this hits on some of those other pieces, highlights that about the student. Again, what this essay focuses more on is a moment or something that a student was working on an initiative and less about their general interest. Both essays are effective. They are good essays, helpful essays. They just share different stories about the student, right? The first one is more about the intellectual curiosity, the academic character, right? The initiative from an academic standpoint, linking classroom concepts to everyday life. That's awesome. We love students to come to our campus that are doing that. Essay 2 kind of moves away from the academic. So maybe the type of student that says, hey, I love science. I see that science is kind of littered all through my activities list. But I really want to drive home this other aspect of myself, who I am, or something I'm proud of. The second essay is probably a better fit for you and your approach, or overcoming challenges, working with others, and demonstrating some type of community mindset, something that you want to impact with the community. Again, Both are very effective. They just go about this in very different ways. So again, there is no right answer. Sometimes students tell me, but what should I write about? I don't know. The most important part, I think, of this college admissions process is for you to reflect on, and I think starting with that, right? And I'm gonna get into some of the tips that I would say. And this is for the activities list and the personal statement. The application, as I showed all them application components earlier on, that those are just tools for you to kind of tell your story, right? And at the end of it, you want your application portfolio to be a good representation of who you are. It's not going to tell the whole story, but a good representation. And sometimes students just dive in. I'm going to work on my activities list this day. I'm going to work on my essay this day. I'm going to ask the teacher over here for a letter recommendation. Before you start diving into all that, take a second to reflect and say, what do I want to tell the college about me, right? What are the important qualities of who I am as a person? That's going to be probably important. And I tell students usually, think about what are 5, 10, 15 qualities of who you are. I think when you push to 15 qualities, they get to some of the more interesting ones. If I asked you, what are the top 3? How would you describe yourself? What are 3 qualities of you? And sometimes students will say, well, I'm creative, I'm dedicated, hardworking, and I'm friendly, right? Those are great. Those are great qualities, but those are ones that a lot of people will talk about. If you spend some more time, dig a little bit deeper about, how would you describe yourself, who you are at 17. Again, I want to reiterate, we do not look for finished products, right? What type of institution would I be if we were just admitting everyone, students who were finished products, right? You all are, this beautiful gem, right? That you come to us and we polish you up. All of our resources and opportunities polish students into this beautiful product when they come from our campus. But, so we don't expect you to be perfect or to have it all figured out, but we expect you to have some reflection about who you are and ultimately what you hope to get out of your experience on our campuses. So think about that, right? Before you start diving into these pieces. With the activities list, do a brain dump and write down all the things that you've been involved with. Talk to your friends, your parents, siblings, teachers to come up with examples. You're not going to knock out the activities list in one night, right? You have to think about what has mattered to you most over 4 years of high school. I think it's important to just keep it to high school, right? The past 4 years. So you might have to revisit that. And if we do have younger students, I'm a big fan of journaling. And so as you are experiencing things, throughout high school, journal, write about those. That's going to help you when you get to your senior year. Again, think about activities that are not the traditional extracurricular activities, and then really practice crafting those descriptions with a limited word count, right? You're going to probably have to rework that a little bit so that you're getting the best bang for the buck in that description. The personal statements, just to give you another resource for you to reference. I showed you a couple of examples of essays here. We have a website at Hopkins called Essays That Worked. It is actually the most visited landing page over the whole Hopkins network. And we upload it every year with essays we really enjoyed. There are some committee comments. So for the admission staff that read the essay, what really resonated for us as a selection committee for that essay, and as well as some information and a quote from students. And so I highly recommend that if you need some inspiration or kind of to put some more tangible pieces to the things that I'm talking about. So check out our Essays That Work page. The hyperlink is there. Everybody has their own style and voice, right? So your essay is not going to sound like that, but I think it gives you a general sense. You will notice that, and we do a good job of diversifying the examples, right? They are, a lot of them are about everyday experiences, but how those experiences impact students is what's really helps them jump off the page, right? You want to think about what information is kind of missing or you want to tell us directly, right? The personal statement and the supplemental essays, that's your opportunity to speak directly to the admissions committee. This gets back to the adjectives exercise. This says 3 to 5. I think go to 10, go to 15. That's going to help you to get to some adjectives that I think are a little bit more, or your values that are going to be a little bit more distinctive. Oh, this is a good one too. Sometimes I meet with students and they are so committed to one essay that they've been working on for a long period of time and it's just not working. but they feel like they need to keep working on it because they spent so much time on an essay already. I think writing 1 or 2 paragraphs, different stories, um, and figuring out which one is easier to write or which one do you feel like is doing a better job clearly articulating the adjectives or values that you're trying to articulate, that will help you then refine. But again, it's not about the topic. I could talk to you and we could think of 10 different essays that are all sharing the same values and attributes of you, right? But some are easier than others. So I would say have a couple of ideas, work those ideas, and then figure out which one you feel most comfortable with. Also, I think that when ChatGPT kind of hit the mainstream, a lot of folks were nervous about AI, generative technology, and I think that there are lots of implications for what it will mean for our society in positive ways. But I will tell you that you're not going to be able to write a good personal statement essay using AI, right? Or you're not going to have a good essay if you have, too many cooks in the kitchen, too many people that are reviewing your essay. It really strips the voice out of the essay, right? AI doesn't really have a soul, right? You're not going to get a voice of a 16, 17-year-old who's applying to college. And I know that might sound a little abstract, but when you read hundreds of thousands of essays, it becomes very clear when a strong voice comes through. I might not know that an essay was generated by AI. We do have something in our process. We do have some ways that we look for authenticity in the application, and you do actually sign something that says that everything in the application was generated by yourself and is truthful to your knowledge. So that is important. However, even if for some reason we don't pick that up, it's just not going to be a good essay. It's going to read very flat, right? It's not going to give a lot of voice, whether you use AI or you have 5 or 6 different people that are reviewing your essay or one person who's heavily editing it, right? So just want to put that out there as a word of caution. The best essays are genuine, they're authentic, they come through in your voice. So I recommend you do that. You're not going to knock out your essay in one weekend even. It's an iterative process. So seniors, I know you're probably in it right now. Juniors, I think when the essay prompts come available in July or August, that's when you really want to start working on that essay and carve out some time, right? Maybe once a week you're revisiting that essay until you get it to a good place. Again, I didn't talk too much about supplemental essays, but those are really important in the process as well. And colleges may have different supplemental essays. And so if you front load the work on your personal statement and get that in a good place before the start of your senior year, you can then dedicate some time in your senior year to those really important supplemental essays. All right, so with that, great, that's perfect. Ended with some time for questions. So I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see the Q&A. Okay, cool. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A feature. If you have any questions about the essay, about what colleges are looking for, how we view or analyze any information you're sending to us, feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A. And then I know we have some counselors who are on the call as well. You all feel free. I know you all work with a lot of students as they're navigating this process, and I'm sure you get lots of questions. So if you have any popular questions that you typically get, you can ask those in the chat as well, in the Q&A as well.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask a question. And I'm sure my colleagues from Broward will also empathize with this as well. We oftentimes have students ask us about who the individual they should go with for a letter recommendation at the school level. Do you have any insight or suggestions to the audience as to how they should go about that process and maybe what teacher or staff member they should select?
Yes. So letter recommendations are really important in our process. So a couple of tips here. One, you want to ask your teachers early, right? So if there are seniors here who haven't asked for letters of recommendation, you need to get on that as soon as possible. I think you want to ask, I defer to your counselor. You could talk to their college and career counseling department. But I would ask them at the end of your junior year or at the very beginning of your senior year. You don't want to be the last letter of recommendation on the pile, and you want to give them a lot of time to be able to write it. I would first say check with the colleges you're interested in. That's why it's important to start working on that college list so you have an idea of where you're applying, because colleges may have certain requirements for letters. Some schools may say, maybe you're applying to a school of engineering. They will only take letters from math and science teachers, right? But most schools are going to be pretty open. They will say, we just want someone who has taught you in an educational environment. That's what we say at Hopkins. I generally think you want a teacher that has taught you later on in your sophomore, junior, or going into your senior year, because they're going to have a better sense of who you are kind of now as opposed to a ninth grader. I know I changed a lot since ninth grade in high school. I would ask someone who can speak to your academic character. Again, think about what we're looking for. Sometimes I think students ask teachers for letters that they got an A in their class. It was an easy class. They did really well. I knocked it out of the park. And oftentimes I get those letters and they say, Calvin got all A's on the assignments. He was a great student, participated in class. It's going to be a great addition to your college, right? That letter's not that helpful, right? Because I know you did well in the class. I'm looking at the transcript. I saw you got a good grade, right? This should tell me something else about your work ethic or your love of learning. Maybe it was a class that you didn't do so well or you worked really hard, right? I remember one of the best letters of recommendation I got was a student who wanted to go into science. It wasn't, the most gifted student academically from a science standpoint. Was a great student by all means, but it didn't come easy to him. But there was a great letter from a science teacher that talked about the student's work ethic. It talked about coming before school and after school and coming during lunch to master the concepts. That's going to tell me more about a student's academic character than simply they did well in the class, right? So keep that in mind. Again, thinking about what we're trying to get out of that letter, and is this letter that I'm getting from the teacher going to provide that? I would suggest, and I don't know how, depending on the districts here, how you all go about the asking for letters, requesting letters of recommendation. But in the age of technology, I think the art of conversation is lost, right? And so I always recommend that students sit down with their teachers and talk to them about all the amazing things that they hope the teacher shares in the letter, right? Teachers have lots of students; they have their own lives. Their life doesn't necessarily revolve around you, right? And so you need to remind them about some of the experiences. And so do yourself a favor. You can't control what they write, but you can control how you prepare them for what they write. So I think that's something that I would recommend. It's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you for the response and all the added context. I know we appreciate it. I'm sure the audience does as well.
Absolutely. Other questions? Any other questions about essays, letters of recommendation? That was a good one. One other thing I was thinking about too, you want to make sure that, again, this is probably, seniors, you're in the thick of things right now, right? You kind of have to, get all your stuff together. And I know you're kind of working towards those deadlines. But especially for if there's juniors here, I think it's important to kind of block out time for college. It is a marathon, not a sprint. And so, carving out a couple of hours a week to start working on college things, starting with the college search, which I think is one of the most important parts of this process. What type of environment are you looking for? Visiting colleges nearby. We all now have, virtual information sessions and virtual tours. That'll help you narrow down the list because, as I mentioned earlier, we have lots of different colleges, across the country, but we all do things slightly differently. And so it'll be helpful to understand what are the requirements for the colleges and start to track that. But that requires you to know who you're interested in, right? So do that search, identify those colleges, start chipping away at this process as you work through your senior year going into the summer, because I'm sure the seniors will tell you starting early is a good idea. I know there's some seniors here who probably wish they started a little bit earlier. So make sure you get a good jump on that. and work with your counselor. I cannot, recommend the counselors enough that are in your building, those advisors, leveraging your network. That's an important thing I always tell students when they come to college too. You need to build your network. Start building your network in high school because there are adults around that are willing to help you. Any final questions before we wrap up?
We have two in the Q&A. One question is, do you suggest as a student I should not use the same essay for other school applications, even if I change the school's name?
So the personal statement's going to go to all schools anyway if you're applying with the common application. So that one essay will go to all schools. Now, the supplements, the most compelling supplements are very specific to our institution. And so you can't just change the name, right? So you need to really do your research and be able to, most of them are going to ask you why are you applying to us? And we have a lot of similarities, but we are different. And we do like to hear about our differences. We want you to kind of recognize that we are different. So I would suggest, shifting those essays around and also making sure that you are, just why, time management's important. Sometimes I get supplements that feel like they're just blatantly not about Hopkins, I can tell, or they forget to change the name. So I do think that you want to be careful about using templates or the same essays. Same thing with scholarships. If you're applying for outside scholarships, you're usually going to use similar essays for different scholarships, but I do think you want to make them a little bit specific to that scholarship as well. So again, if you carve out time to be able to do that, you'll be able to, that's important. Usually when you procrastinate, then you're kind of rushing to do it all. But I do think you want to vary up those essays for sure. I also see there's a question about how long or big the essay should be. So the Common App will tell you, I think it's either 600 or 650 words. And you can't go any longer than that. It actually will cut off. So that's how long that essay is. And, whether the college is using the Common Application, if they have their own application or if they have supplements, they'll tell you how long the essay should be. So just abide by that. We give word counts for a reason. So colleges will usually tell you that as well.
And then there was another one. How significant are the service hours?
Yes. So this is good. I've actually done a lot of work with National Honor Society. I've done a lot of presentations with them around the country. And, obviously NHS is really big on service hours. And I've actually worked with them to, I think there's a misunderstanding. I care less about, this is kind of similar to other quantitative pieces. I care less about the hours themselves and more about the experience through the service, right? It's not just the act of the service, it's what you've gained or the impact you've made. So while, having 500 service hours on its surface feels impressive, I really am going to dig into, and your role is to think about and reflect about that service and what it's meant to you and how you made an impact. And so I think that's a big misconception. We have these required service hours in schools around the country, and I think that students oftentimes just go through the motions and check that off as a checkbox. But then they get to us and they say, I'm going to ask you about those things, or if you've spent a significant amount of time, that I want to know about that. So spend some time reflecting on your service experience and if it matters to you.
I believe those are all the questions in the Q&A. Team, let me know if I'm wrong. I'm having a little bit of lagging on my side, but I think that's it. I do have one
Dr.
question.
Whitaker, I don't see anything.
Okay, I do have a question for Mr. Wise, though. How many full ride scholarships are you bringing to Florida?
So I'll say this. So some of the most generous when it comes to financial aid schools in the country, most of their quote unquote scholarships or free rides, money that you don't have to pay back, is going to be need based. So we make Hopkins really affordable for a lot of students. We gave out over $150 million in grant money last year. That's coming from the institution. Ours is institutional money. But the vast majority of that is need-based. So, or for example, you see a lot of these, see students, they got a full ride to Harvard, right? All the Ivy Leagues, they don't give out merit scholarships. All their financial aid is need-based. So if a kid has only got a full ride to Harvard, it's because their family needs a full ride, right? We meet 100% of a student's demonstrated need. We're also a no-loan school. So the answer to that is simple and complicated. If you are admitted to Hopkins and you're a student that has significant need, if you are admitted, we're going to fully fund you, right? So that's the positive thing. The challenge is for those families who are usually coming from a little bit of means and what we say you can afford versus what you feel like may be a little bit more different. So it is a little bit more of a complicated answer, but we do strive to make Hopkins really affordable. So we would love to come down there and share that with your families. I always take on the opportunity to get away from the slightly cold weather up here to talk to folks down in Florida. So we'll be more than willing to come down to talk to you all about that as well.
All right, attendees. Well, Mr. Wise cannot pay for everyone to attend Johns Hopkins. So with that being said, I need you all to be back here on November 20th, and we're going to talk about scholarships. We're going to have the scholarship plug in the house, same time, same place, and we're going to take Mr. Wise off the hot seat for paying for everybody's tuition to attend Johns Hopkins. So if you missed anything about tonight's presentation and you're like, man, I missed what he said about essay writing, don't worry. Just go back, click on the link later on, and you will be directed right back to this video to be able to view on our YouTube channel. So on behalf of all the counties involved in this multi-district collaboration, Osceola County, Broward County, Orange County, Palm Beach County, Mr. Wise, we want to thank you so much for giving us your time and your effort, and keep doing what you do, helping our students succeed. And to all our wonderful attendees, we will see you all at the next College and Career Corner, November 20th. Take care, everyone, and have a good night.
Bye.